you're first getting started candle making, it's hard to decide what kind of wax you want to use. Whether you choose soy or parasoy, coconut, apricot, beeswax, or you come up with your own combination of them, it's completely a personal choice. Some things to think about are, how do you want to work with your wax? Do you want it to be in pellet form, flake form? Do you want it to come in a brick? Do you not care? Do you want it to be completely natural? Do you not mind if there's some paraffin in it? And you're gonna have to do your research to get started. Hi, I'm Lisa with Candles by Sincerely Ice Blue. If you're new here, don't forget to click on the subscribe button, become part of the channel. Love to have you. And on this channel, we talk about everything from getting started in candle making to the business of selling candles and everything in between. And I really do mean everything in between. And if you're new to the station or this is the first one of my videos you're watching, you're gonna find out there is a lot of in between. Since we're talking about wax today, I want to talk to you about a product I've been using. And it's from American Soy Organics and it's called their Freedom Wax. So today what we're going to do is actually work with the Freedom Wax. I'm going to show you how to make a candle. If this is your first time with candles and candle making, this is a wonderful product to use to get started. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit during the video about some of the differences that were recommended to me by their service team and their customer service department. So let's take a look and get started making a candle, maybe your first one. Oh, and one other thing. We're going to also talk about making a wickless candle. So let's take a look at what that all means, how to make a candle, how to make it wickless, and get started. Okay, so to get started, it's a good idea to have some kind of work mat. I got these at the dollar store, and they're just dog or cat placemats, and they work wonderful. They clean up and wipe up well. You're gonna have your scale, your thermometer, your fragrance oil, and your pouring pitchers. So to get started, I'm gonna simply turn on the scale and I'm gonna tare it out. So what that means is I'm gonna put my pouring pitcher on here and I'm gonna hit the tare button so that it goes back to 0. That way I can fill this up with my wax pellets in order to get started. Now, if you'd rather work, I have mine set for ounces. Some people prefer to work in grams. If you want to change it, you're simply going to just click on the unit button and you can see it's changing and now it's on grams. So today I'm going to work with ounces. And so since we're working in ounces today, I'm going to have 41.4 ounces, or if you're working with grams, I would do 1,173 grams. So if you are having trouble converting, there's a lot of wonderful calculators. You can just go into Google and all you have to do is type in ounces to grams calculator and it'll bring up one for you. Now I'm using the small pouring pitcher to pour into the larger one just because it's easy for me. So remember, we're going to 41.4. And we're at 41.4. So we're going to get this set off to the side and get our double boiler set up. So if you're using a double boiler and you've never used one before, you're going to fill the bottom with water. If you don't have a double boiler where the pot nestles on top, you can use a larger pot, and you can see that this pitcher is built with a handle on it. So I can simply just hang this off of the side of my pot if I use a large pot, and I can turn it into my own homemade double boiler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the water heating up. And I'm going to start pouring in my wax pellets. Now, I don't have a super large double boiler, so I'm going to want to pour it in and get it melted and start it melting before I add more. Okay, so we're almost to 185 degrees. Now, I know the packaging for the Freedom Soy Wax talks about heating your wax to 160 adding the fragrance oil with a 10% max, and then pouring it after it starts to cool off. And I've been struggling with wicking a couple different vessels, and we have tried heating it and following those instructions, and the cold throw out of the Freedom Soy Wax is absolutely beautiful, and the pores are gorgeous. And we're at 185. So we're gonna pour in that fragrance oil and stir for 2 minutes. So I reached out to the contact team, the customer support team over at American Soy Organics, and Tasha has been absolutely spectacular at helping us and talking to me about some different things to try in order to increase my hot throw, because even though that cold throw, if I walk in my office right now, the cold throw just hits you as soon as you walk in the door. But when we're burning the candles, there's been absolutely little to no hot throw. So they suggested you're going to heat your wax to 185, add the fragrance oil at that point, and stir for 2 to 3 minutes, because you want to make sure that you're giving that fragrance oil time to bind up with your wax. And after you give it a good stir for 2 to 3 minutes, what you want to do is take that wax melted off of the boiler, and you're going to let it cool until it just starts to set up. So when you first start seeing the signs of cloudiness in the wax is when you're going to want to pour that into your vessels. So I do have a side note, is that my double boiler is rather small in size and I wasn't able to fit the full batch in. So we actually split it up into 2 pieces, and both batches are going to be 22 ounces of wax and 1.8 ounces of fragrance. And that's going to make the 5 candles that we're planning on pouring this evening. Now, if your wax gets to 185 and all the pellets haven't melted yet, don't be too concerned, because once you add that fragrance oil and start stirring, the rest of those pellets will dissolve pretty quickly. And if you're not familiar with the American Soy products, they do come in these nice little pellets, and I do have another video that goes a little bit more into detail about that. And I will try and attach the link in here as well for you. So we should be coming up to between the 2 and 3 minute mark pretty soon. Now, like I said, what we're gonna wanna do is turn off the heat on your double boiler. And then you're gonna wanna take that, once you get the fragrance oil stirred in, you are gonna wanna take that top portion off and set it to the side so it starts to cool. Now, if you're using that pitcher, you're still gonna do the same thing. Take it out of the water and set it off to the side. One of the things that Tasha also pointed out is you don't want to overheat and burn the wax, especially when you're working with soy. So you do not ever want it to get above 200 degrees when you're melting. So if you see that temperature climbing up over the 185 mark to about the 190, 195, you definitely are going to want to pull it off of the heat. And you're not going to want to add your fragrance oil until that heat comes back down to about 185. So you don't have to concern yourself with the temperature once the fragrance oil is in and you're done stirring it, because you're simply going to just let it sit until it starts to get cloudy before you pour. So we have a little bit of time to wait, and we will be back. Okay, while we're waiting, which could be a while for our wax to start cooling, I wanted to show you a couple other tools. So when you're talking about pouring pitchers, you can see they come in different sizes. And I got this larger one in a kit for tart making, and I got the smaller one in my very first kit for candle making when I started. And this little stir spoon that you see here actually came with it. And then I also got this in a different kit. So those are different pitchers, and it's just gonna depend on your preference. This one's great if you're using a large pot. These ones tend to float away a little bit, but this one has a little bit more weight to it. When you're talking about thermometers, you can go with a digital model. There's also a smaller thermometer here. Comes in a nice holding case. And then there's also a larger one. This is more the style that comes in the deep fryers. So if you have a deep fryer, you most likely can use one of these. And you do want to be careful because same thing with this, it's got a nice pointy end to it. So there's a couple different styles you can use with thermometers. It's totally preference. I've got two different styles of scales, and I highly recommend having more than one to work with. That way when you're doing double batches, or you could be weighing out your wax on one and your fragrance oils on another. When you're measuring your fragrance oils, I've got this nice little cup that I actually got at a festival we went to. And you can also use Dixie cups. And I've also used actual shot glasses, which work well too because they're glass and they clean up well. The different containers, two of the containers that we're gonna be using is the jar from the Dollar Tree that I've been started using. It's square and it's got a 3 1/8 inch diameter. And then I have a ceramic container. And when you're testing, it's also a good idea to always use the exact same fragrance. That way, after a while and you start getting used to being able to put your wicks in and what works and what doesn't, you're gonna know what that's supposed to, how this flavor is supposed to work for you. So the one that we've chosen to use for all of our testing is the Jamaica Me Crazy, and that's by California Candle Supply. Okay. Temperature got down to about 98 degrees and we're starting to just see the first hints of cloudiness. So we're gonna go ahead and pour since we're under that 100-degree mark. And we're gonna just let those final drips drip there for a second and get these poured. So same thing as we did before, you're gonna wanna tear out. So we've got the glass on the scale, teared it out. And we're gonna get this one poured. So the square is actually a 10 ounce. And what we're gonna do is, because the American Freedom Wax or the Soy Organics customer service recommended 2 different wicks, and I only have one of them in stock at the moment. So we're gonna actually do what's called a wickless pour. And that means we're gonna pour with absolutely no wick in the container. Gonna set that one aside. And then the remaining wax is gonna go into our white container. So what we're gonna do is tomorrow, once these are set, we're gonna take a skewer and we're gonna poke it straight down the middle, and you're gonna place the wick right down the center without actually having it glued to the bottom of the jar. What this is gonna allow for is, if that wick ends up not working out, it's burning too hot, it's pooling or tunneling, or just ends up not being the way we want it, we can actually pull that wick out, and then we can insert a new wick without having to totally re-pour the candle. All right, so now we're gonna do our second batch. And this has probably taken us about an hour total, even though I didn't tape all of it, because we're doing it in such a small pot and we had to break it up into 2 batches. So we're gonna just do the exact same process all over again with melting the wax, putting in the fragrance oil after we heat it to 185, stirring it for 2 to 3 minutes, and then letting it cool down to where we're just starting to see the first signs of cloudiness. Now, I had mentioned earlier that the CEO of American Soy Organics had mentioned a couple different things for us. He actually got involved through the customer service team, and a couple things for you to think about when you're working with their wax is make sure that you're checking that your fragrance oils are compatible for use in soy wax. If they're not, and they're for use maybe for just straight parasoy or paraffin wax, you're definitely not going to get a good hot throw. Another thing they said is when you're testing for hot throw and you can smell a really strong cold throw, but when you light the candle, you're not getting a hot throw, is even, he said, this is gonna kind of sound funny, but one thing you wanna do is walk out of the room. So for me, sometimes I'll light a candle while I'm working in my office, and I won't be able to smell the scent at all. But then my husband will come in and be like, ooh, that smells nice. And your nose does tend to build up a memory. So putting your nose up to it and sniffing it and then walking out of the room may clear your sinuses out, clear your nose out. Another thing is sniffing coffee, just like when you go buy perfume. And then a third thing that he recommended is the pouring at the cooler temperatures and waiting until you see the wax starting to get cloudy. Now you don't want to wait until it's really starting to set up, because then it's not going to pour properly. And he said just wait until it starts getting cloudy and when the wax and the fragrance oil are just starting to crystallize. And the last thing he recommended is that when you are curing your candles, you do not want to have a fan or an air conditioner blasting into that room. It does sound really strange to have a really good cold throw but no hot throw. And he recommends making sure that you're letting your candles cool slowly. Also, do not set your candles directly on granite, or it'll pull the heat out of the candle quicker, and it'll tend to give you some of the problems with adhesion to your glass. So definitely want to make sure you have a nice stable environment while you're curing. And then also, again, just make sure that you don't have a fan running. Have a nice steady temperature in the room, 76 degrees, 78 degrees. And you definitely want to cure it for a minimum of 2 weeks before you do that burn testing. So we did move, by the way, we moved our vessels off of the granite countertop, set it on a magazine. And you can see now how quickly, since we've poured it into the container, it's just starting to set up and solidify. So we're gonna leave it sit on the magazine overnight, and then in the morning, we'll do a video on inserting the wicks for you. Okay, so it's about 24 hours later, and we're going to use a wooden skewer right down the center to make a hole. And then for this jar, its diameter is 3 1/8 inch. So it was recommended that we try a CD 18. So we're simply gonna set that down in there. And then we're gonna do the same thing to the next one. And the next one is also 3 1/8 inch. So it's gonna be the exact same wick, which is a CD 18. Now when you're doing this part, you can either just eyeball the center, or you can use one of those wick guides just to make sure you're getting the center. The next two, we're also going to use a CD 18. And the first one, the smoky blue one, is also 3 1/8. Okay, so we got the wick in the first one, and it's actually a tapered jar, but the diameter at the top is 3 inches, just 3 inches. And then the cobalt blue one here, that one is actually another 3 1/8. And then the last one is a straight-sided jar. And that one is a diameter of 2 1/2 inches, and they recommended to try an Eco 8. So what we do on those is, you can see we cut off the tabs, and then we just slide that wick right in there. Now, you can always hit the tops of these with a heat gun, which is what I'm gonna do just to kind of close that hole up a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to heat them with the heat gun just a little bit around the wick area. And you can see that the tops of these candles actually pour beautiful. They're nice and smooth with no issues. And you don't have to heat it very much with the heat gun, just enough, because once you start heating it, that wax is going to fill into that hole. And you don't want to overheat it because then you're kind of remelting the candle. So you're just going to hit them all lightly, let them sit and re-cure. And since we made these yesterday, we got 2 weeks to let them cure. Tomorrow, if you wanted to, the next day, so on day 3, you could always trim the wicks down, put labels on them once you test them and they're working well. But for us, since we're just doing some testing, we're going to go ahead and let them cure for 2 weeks. So how'd you do? Did you take a lot of notes? Did you learn anything? Hopefully you did. The American Freedom Wax is really easy to use. And this is kind of what one of those tops came out as. And you can see that after we smoothed it out and hit it with the heat gun, the little hole that was there that we poked in to drop that wicks into is gone. So we're going to let these sit for about 2 weeks. And I'm looking forward to see how they burn. And in one of my next videos, I think it is actually my next video, we're going to talk about what the top 3 biggest problems that I actually realized I was doing, or it might even be more than 3, I don't know, but I can tell you there's one main one that has to do with testing that I want to talk to you about, and it's kind of humbling. So the biggest takeaways from today are kind of some of the things that I learned from the customer service team, and it's some of the things that you really don't necessarily think about, like not turning on the fans or making sure that the air conditioner isn't blowing and the room isn't too cold in the room that you're curing in. Walking in and out of the room or smelling some coffee in between, because our noses do get accustomed to the fragrances. And something to think about is perfume or cologne. Once you get a brand new perfume or cologne and you first spray it on you, don't you feel like, whoa, I sprayed too much? And you just think it's too heavy and it just takes up all of your nose. But the longer you wear the fragrance, people then start to have a propensity to double spray and triple spray because I can't smell it if I don't. But you forget that your nose is accustomed to it, and the people that you're walking into are like, whoa, too much, too much. And I can tell you, I have a lot of candles sitting here with me in my office. So I sit in here during the day and I think I can kind of smell it when I first walk in the room, but sitting in my office all day, by the end of the day, I can smell right now. I don't smell any of it unless I actually pick that candle up and hold it to my face. But my husband walks in the room and he's like, whoa, too many different scents going on at once, because they all hit him because he doesn't sit in here. So that's something to take into consideration. Another thing is, if you're brand new to candle making, definitely stick with the description and the instructions on the bag or on the website about heating the product to 160, putting in your fragrance, and then going ahead and pouring after you stir that fragrance for 2 minutes. But if you're looking to get more of a hot throw because this is something you're going to sell, that's when you want to take it to the 185 degree mark and then add your fragrance and then cool it until it's starting to set, or you're starting to see that fogginess in the wax. And I can tell you the pores came out beautifully, and you saw that for yourself. So it really didn't have an effect on the tops. As a matter of fact, looking at them, I feel like it got better jar adhesion doing it that way. And that's because we're making it in larger batches. But if you're making 1 or 2 candles for yourself or family or friends, that 160 degree mark should be just fine. So you're just going to have to play around with that. And I know you hear that in all the videos. And it is frustrating. But you really do have to, because there's a lot of variables that go into making a candle. And I have another video where I talk about that, and we talk about how a candle is truly a system and how there's so many things that go hand in hand to make a candle work the way you want it to. And that's everything from the heat time to the different fragrances to the pour temperature to the curing and just your jars and your wicks. And there's a lot to think about. So don't get discouraged. This is a wonderful wax. I think you'll really enjoy working with it. And that's all I have for you today. So hopefully you enjoyed our conversation. You enjoyed learning a little bit more about the wax and seeing how it works in person or by video, as in person as you're going to get right now from wherever you all are. And hopefully you'll click on that subscribe button. Again, become part of the family and part of the channel. Don't forget to click on that little bell and get notified as new videos post. I try and do 2 a week. Sometimes I can only do 1 just because of my busy schedule, but I'm doing my best. And if you have any questions, comments, I answer everything everybody sends me. Follow me on Instagram. Leave the comments right here. Anybody that gets to me on any type of question or something you'd like to see, I do get back to everybody. It might take a day or 2 sometimes when I'm traveling, like I will be this week, but I will get back to you. So that's it. Like I always say, live your life out loud. And this week, just do it with a little bit more fragrance in your life, just not too much. Take care. See you soon.